Friends, would you pray with me? Holy and loving Emmanuel, take our lips and speak with them. Take our minds and think with them. Take our hands and work with them. And take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you and all of creation. Amen. Do you hear what I hear? Over the past few months, while listening to the radio, I've been hearing some ads that have confounded me. LLM agnostic and hallucination-free AI. Let me try that again. LLM agnostic and hallucination-free AI. There's no other further information given over these radio broadcasts as to clues. Are we talking about religion, mental health, recreational drug use, or technology? I really had no idea, and so I had to go and phone a friend. Now, my friend was a little more artificial than real, blue, green, yellow, red in color, rectangular in shape, super close, always at hand, in my pocket at times. This friend I turned to a whole lot, and so has a name that rhymes with McDougal. I typed into my friend engine this word and this question: what is hallucination-free LLM? And of course, it spewed to me, the irony of ironies, using artificial intelligence, this answer. AI hallucination is a phenomenon wherein a large language model, often generative AI, chatbot, or computer vision tool, perceives patterns or objects that are non-existent or imperceptible to human observers, creating outputs that are nonsensical or altogether inaccurate. It went on to say that in 2023, analysts estimate that chatbots are hallucinating as much as 27% of the time, with factual errors presenting 46% of all generated texts. Sometimes it's hard to find the truth out there. Sometimes the very things that we are creating as a species to maybe solve problems that we didn't even have are leading us into more problems and more errors. I have to be clear, Harry, forgive me, I know very little about artificial intelligence. I know you know a lot, and others of you do, and I know it has a lot of real potential. I know it's already doing a lot of good in healthcare settings and other spaces that I really have no idea about, but I have to come with you with a confession that I am skeptical of it. And people like Bill McKibben only emphasize that skepticism in affirming what many of us already know, that AI is a seismic energy sink. There are giant data centers that are coming up that are requiring unbelievable amounts of electricity to fuel them. The fossil fuel companies right now in our country are chomping at the bit to offer up themselves to this new way of being. A reporter from a climate news forum entitled Heated, Ariel Samuelson, writes in a religious sense about the growth of AI, saying that this has become a new savior for the gas industry. So there is something about AI that is to be critical of. AI is causing hallucinations and degradations, deception and harm in its very nature, as one unintended consequence for something that has good purposes at its root. So I want us to think about AI as a stand-in today, as a symbolic expression of evil embodied in our world. I'm not saying that all AI is evil, but I want us to think about it as a symbolic stand-in for the ways that there is so much out there that seems to be intentionally deceiving us and bringing harm and chaos. And the invitation for us on this fourth Advent is to ask that question from an NPR advertisement: how do we get to that hallucination-free space? How do we, as people who follow the Christ child, create a kingdom where all are set jubilee-free? When we type into our Gospel of Luke search engine today, we are given an answer: make haste and follow Mary. If we want to build that kingdom, make haste and follow Mary. Follow her into that Judean town in the hill country, that unnamed place. Join that remarkable young one who is heavy laden with new heavy and hard truths. Pregnancy out of wedlock, God showing up in confusingly unexpected ways with a radical new life implication for her. Follow Mary. Make haste to follow her. Even in her pondering, is she hallucinating? Did there really come an angel named Gabriel to her side and tell her that nothing is impossible with God, or was it all a dream or a nightmare or an illusion, an intentional delusion? There's no time for thinking about such thing, for Mary is on the go. Fresh with the news from this angel, our text today that Merlin has lifted for us today takes its place. She goes without hesitation and makes haste to go and be with Elizabeth. But she goes not knowing the future or what will come next. And I love that that Judean hill country town is unnamed to underscore this unknowing. For there is truth in not knowing, in not having all the answers. Not knowing is not the absence of wisdom or intelligence, but a form of open-heartedness, an openness to the unknown that Mary embodies. She moves ahead not knowing where her consenting to this angelic annunciation might lead her. She does not know where, but she does know what and who. She knows what she trusts, her tradition, her Jewish tradition, her gut, her sense of mystery in the world that allows her to take in things that are just beyond logical explanation, and she knows who. She knows her trust that comes from her gut originates from Adonai. So we can glean this morning from Mary in the work of kingdom building. When we don't know, go. Go to someone you know. Kinship is kingdom. They may not know which way that you should go, but they will know. There is spiritual wisdom in solidarity. There is spiritual power in friendships, relationships, therapists. There is spiritual knowing in the going to someone you know when you don't know. In those days that Mary sent out and went, she brought us with her. And in the result of this going, a sacred encounter, which I name as one of the most sacred in our scriptural texts, occurs. The Sophia of Anamkara, the wisdom of soul friends there, Elizabeth and Mary in that unnamed space. Two relatives, one young, one old, coming together to encounter one another and to encourage one another. So like the long lineage of ancestors in faith before them, from Hagar to Hannah, Ruth and Naomi, Jonathan and David, Mary and Elizabeth come together to find hope and direction. Blessed are you among women. Elizabeth immediately greets Mary with a benediction. And so this holy encounter unfurls, this sacred solidarity, these two women of faith, both preparing to give birth to prophetic forces of love in this world, both facing the unknown together. Immediately, as Elizabeth shows that love to Mary by reminding her about her core faith. Blessed are you, Mary, for you believed there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to you by God. Yes, Mary consents to the angel, but she also believes. She has a deep-rooted faith that comes from a tradition. She was prepared for the unexpected interruption in her life. Over the past few decades, I am grateful for the ways that Protestants have done some reclaiming work of Mary and placing her back into a central role in our faith tradition. Yet each Advent, when we careen toward Christmas, I find it hard to claw past Mary as unmatchable, as blessed among all others in humanity, as unattainable and unrelatable at times. So I find Nadia Bolz-Weber's recent comments describing her own faith story as helpful. She writes, "You need not muster up any feelings of closeness to God, and you need not intellectually assent to theological propositions. Maybe faith isn't about the intellect or even feelings. Maybe it's about a deep knowing. And I suspect that if you quiet down all those churchy messages you have received, you might in the moments between your breaths, in the moments between your doubts, be just barely still enough to know that God is. Nadia, I think, describes perhaps the grounding that Mary has, and something that we too can attain as well. That takes her down from a pedestal but brings her among us to be blessed among all women and humans here among us, to set an example for us. I can only imagine the hope that bubbled up from when these two creatives, Mary and Elizabeth, these generators, these influencers, these creation contenters came together, the possibilities pregnant with them that they brought forward to our world. Their love, I believe, is the original seed to the love of Christ that John prepares the way for, and then Jesus fully embodies for the rest of the cosmos. When these two fierce, loving women co-create together, I believe they show us a way to love in a specific form that we name as open-heartedness. A way to understand this, thanks to our racial justice sacred reckonings process in this church, is to think about its opposite, hard-heartedness. We think of Pharaoh, who is confronted by Moses and is told to let the people go, and Pharaoh is not able to because of that hard heart. Hard-heartedness takes away our ability to connect with others, to have empathy toward others. So open-heartedness is an orientation, an intentional one toward listening, toward curiosity, towards connecting. It's a skill that can be nurtured and developed even if it's not one that comes naturally to us. So here is a word for all of us today. If you feel isolated and alone, perhaps especially feeling that during the holiday season, it is not the end for you. There is an open-hearted invitation for you to reach out, to go, to make haste, to connect with someone else. And do not give in to the lies of the world that you are alone and you have no one else. Church is by definition us. There are people here in this congregation and in other faith communities that are ready to connect with you. We are designed in our nature, it is, to be us and to connect across difference. So please go when you feel most alone and find and connect with an Elizabeth, to cross the generations, to take in the fierce ancestry of faith that goes before us. And in so doing, open your own heart so that others can find that love as well. Another person who opened his heart to the ways of love in our world is someone we know once as Saul, who then opened his heart and was renamed Paul. And in his trying to cajole the early church community in Corinth back to its core essence of open-heartedness, in a direct contrast to Rome's hard-heartedness, he scribes these words that now have probably been inscribed on many of our hearts. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. So friends, the love of open-heartedness affirmed by Paul and Mary and Elizabeth and John and Jesus is not artificial intelligence, but natural wisdom. It exists to counter the hallucinations, the things that are out there in our world intentionally set up to trip us up. So I would empower us, I would encourage us to go into the places where there is open-heartedness, where there is love. I love that Mary, after this central reaffirmation and reminding of her core essence in her faith by Elizabeth, from that sacred solidarity, from her emerges that song that we know as the Magnificat. We lift, of course, that name from its original first word in Latin, to magnify. It comes from megas, the root word meaning to make great, to make big, to enlarge, to magnify with a glass, to look at, to illuminate, to make things to come into more focus. I love that she does that because in so doing, she lifts a revolutionary truth that God is here to upset the societal norms that too often lift the billionaires above the marginalized. God is here to flip those things over and to bring about a table-turning, radical equality into our world. These are fierce words that come out of Mary and come to our world to condemn those who would take advantage and have power over others. I had a chance to slip away the past few days to Washington, D.C., which is a radical gift for me and my family. We had a sudden desire to get to that space before things radically shift in January and to sort of see democracy at work and to name some of the ancestors in faith who have fought hard to find that radical equality and place where all are created in equality and are lifted into the same space, at least the ideals. I sadly had to miss some of the wonderful services here, our beautiful service in the midst of the snow on the docks on the winter solstice. But in that space, I had a chance to get to the National Zoo with Rowan and Becky, and there was a Komodo dragon in that zoo. If you've ever been there, it's an incredible place. And they had a telescope right there. I've never seen this before, a telescope right outside of the glass so you could zoom in and see the scales and the eyes of this ancient-looking, wise Komodo friend and sibling. And it reminded me of looking more deeply, of magnifying the things here, right here in our very midst that are ancient and yet are deeply full of wisdom and full of love. So I invite us to find those spaces, to magnify the things around us of love, to look at our own church community and see love in the form of deacons' Christmas bags with pocket prayer shawls being given out to those who most need some love this season. To look to that dock and see the snow falling and the freezing cold and our gathered community faithfully celebrating the winter solstice and seeing this world as a place of jubilee, not just of chaos. I want us to see love as Sandra joining this church today from 3 hours to the west of us. She's now in Oregon, but she lives in the islands outside of Seattle. She is a full part of our community, and yet she lives 3,000 miles away. She's 3 time zones away, 3 hours earlier for us. I want us to see love as Jesus cleaning and vacuuming this sanctuary chancel floor before our worship service. Love as these poinsettias lovingly given. Love as the cold fingers of Tom playing the organ and our choir with its scarves and hats on this morning, bringing us to a lifted space to empower us this week. Love as Blackjack Design ATEM mini splits that are controlling our AV to connect us across time and space as we worship together. Love as activists at Capitol Hill in DC and here in our city advocating for more justice. Love as this banner, You Are Loved, which was lifted up a few months ago at a memorial service where someone was scared to come into this space to celebrate their own grandfather at their funeral, and they saw this and they knew that they had a place in this sanctuary. Friends, there are so many examples of love in our world. I pray that when we face the hard times and the unknowing of the days ahead, that we would look more closely and see the love that is unfurling around us again and again. One of the highlights of our 2-day trip to D.C. was getting into the Congress and seeing our own senators, Warren and Markey, create some historic legislation as they lifted up 2 new judges. But I also got to see Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock from Georgia, and I was deeply inspired to see him, the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, Dr. King's former community, senator from Georgia. He is the one who said, the church work doesn't end at the church door. That's where it starts. And I really appreciate having him as a pillar of faith in our Senate right now, reminding us that, yes, we can look for love in the midst of our congregation, but we really need to look for it out there. To see the young activists in Montana who have overturned and have been upheld by the Supreme Court in Montana, saying that they have a right to a future of clean air and a climate that is not full of chaos. That's going to have ripple effects for our country. To see the places in our world of good trouble and the people who are inviting us into that in our world today. So friends, look for the love, magnify it, help others to see it, bring your magnifying glasses out into our world, even when your fingers are cold, and remember the love that Mary and Elizabeth bring about, that says no to separation and hallucination, but yes to an authentic wisdom rooted in the one who we have sung about already. Angels announce with shouts of mirth, Christ who brings new life to earth. Set every peak and valley humming with the news, the Lord is coming. People, look east and sing today. Love, the Lord is on the way. Amen.